Okay, we're at 7 o'clock. So welcome to everybody joining our the EU version, or European version, I should say now, of the Natural Landscape Photographer of the Year. I don't know what we'll call this. We'll call this some form of what makes a picture great. Why did judges select pictures? I wish we knew. We'll get as close as we can. We have with us Sandra Bartocha, who was a judge on our competition last year and will be a judge again this year, and Rajesh, one of the co-organizers of the competition here. Hello, Sandra and Rajesh.
Hello, Tim. Sandra.
We also have, as panelists at the moment, 3 photographers. We went through a random name in the hat selection to pick out some willing victims that agreed to share their pictures. And we're going to look at those a little bit later to address what we think, why they did well and why they didn't do well. So we've chosen out of each person 3 images that did well in the competition, 3 images that did not so well, or the best ones and the worst ones, you could say. Not great words to use. I just want to check, Brian, can you hear me at the moment?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't here before, but I'm back.
Oh, that's all right. I'm gonna mute you for a second. I just wanted to test that worked for a moment, because we're going to start with just a brief chat about competitions in general. Let me gallery mode. There you go. So Sandra, we've already had a little bit of a chat like this after the competition, which was for the book, and it was a question of what your experience of judging was like, and also how you decide whether you like a picture or not in a competition. Now, there's lots of different aspects to it. First of all, it's probably worth saying is that you've judged quite a few competitions in the past. I would say you help organize the GDT competition, and you're a judge thereof, I believe.
Yes. I mean, I'm not always a judge, but I've been organizing it since 2007. So I've been seeing how judging works with a panel of judges for many years, and of course I've been invited in several other juries over the past years in the whole world. It is always interesting to see how the different approaches to judging work, and it's very different. I'm like, some organizers are like organizing everything by themselves and letting only the final judges judge like a very few things. Sometimes you don't even discuss, just give a few votes, and then you don't even know what the result is. I really enjoyed the judging that you prepared and organized, not only because of the very high quality of the images. I was really impressed because it's a niche topic, landscape as such, and with all the different categories. But seeing the variety of quality work within that kind of niche really blew me away. And so finding or judging what's the best is always a process of weighing. Weighing against each other. There's coming experience with it that you have because you've seen so many images, and I think judging will never be neutral as such. It can't, because you always take with you your collected memory of what you've seen so far and what you may be looking for. So there's not an easy answer to this.
No, well, one of the questions is, I was interested in to begin with, was really a lot of us spend a lot of time looking at pictures on social media. What would you say the biggest difference between seeing what you like on a social media stream or on Instagram and judging photographs in a competition? Do you approach both in the same way, or does your mind go into a different process when judging?
I think a little bit. Competitions always suffer in a way from a short moment that you see the image sometimes. I think the advantage here in this competition is that the judges have seen the images before and had time to really take care that they can appreciate the broads of what has been sent in. I think with Instagram or social media in general, you are very fast consumer. So everything that pops out immediately has a chance to survive in a way, and then plays the algorithm. But I think like in a competition like this, you have the chance to have a view on images that don't stick out immediately but take a little bit longer to appreciate, and those are mostly the images I think survive longer because they are more timeless, and then they are more complex and like in the end they just stand the test of time because you have spent so much time with them and still they are not boring because they are not like candy images.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I mean, to give you an idea, if in the early stages of the competition, we're looking at 13,000 images last year and maybe more next year. And to do that over the space, I think we spent a week going through pretty much full time those images across everybody. It still only gives you a few seconds per image when you're running through them. So getting past that first stage is almost an instinctual reaction of whether an image is standing out. Obviously, if you see something interesting, you'll spend a few more moments looking at it to assess it, but normally it would have to have something that stands out to begin with. And then in the later stages of the competition, it can be an image that has that longevity, like you say, that keeps you interested, that doesn't become tiring. Because inevitably, a wow image, it can only really wow once in the same way. So each image has to have more than a simple instant explosion of attraction.
That's true, but I think from what I experience and what I remember from our discussions, like taste can be very different, and yes. So I think that an image that might be appreciated by all judges is not necessarily the best or the most innovative, because it's just able to please everyone in the judging room, kind of like universal beauty, or like everything is done right, the perfect light, the hallelujah thing, and then maybe a very interesting and composition or whatever. But I really think that the standout images are the ones who need a little bit longer, maybe for somebody to appreciate. And it can be that there's people who really just don't like it. And I mean, like we experienced it in the panel.
Yes, absolutely.
There were people where I think, why don't you think it's a beautiful image? I think it's amazing.
It's definitely worth saying something about that, because we had eight people, including the organizer, we had more, but 8 people going through the images in the final stages. And if we looked at the scores that were given, most images only really attracted 2 or 3 judges at a time. There were, I would say, 0 images that all the judges gave top score to. And so in a way to win, you don't have to attract all the judges. You just have to have more than a single attraction. You need to get 2 or 3 judges to be interested in that picture. And then in the way our competition works, in those final stages, the judges get to explain why they like things and convince the other judges why they should choose that image over their image, etc. And I think that worked quite well.
Yeah, I think it's a very important step. I think it's very valuable in finding out what's best. I think just pointing or just giving numbers to images is just promoting the average in usual ways. And images are winning that are good, but not sticking out particularly. I think an image is good when it polarizes in some way. Yes. Because people maybe dislike certain things about it that they can't explain, and other people just love it because it's so special. Yes.
I should say, when I've judged a few of the competitions, and with the judges we have in the competition, it's quite clear that they're quite good at being self-analytical in what works for them. In terms of, you'd expect a lot of the judges to instantly react to wow images, and people have only judged maybe 1 competition or 2 competitions, and looking at thousands of images do react like that. But I think if you've done this a few times, you start to be able to filter out things that work for you, even if they're subtle. You can recognize that in a picture quite quickly. So it doesn't necessarily have to jump at you in the first place.
Yeah, it's, I mean, if you have experience, you can't imagine how it's without experience. So sometimes it's really tough for me to see how judges react to some images, because I think, oh God, we've seen this 1,000 times or something. And of course, you have to ask yourself the question, what is the aim of the competition as well? So what do we want to see? Do we want to highlight somebody who's really taking a lot of effort and creating a shot of an area which is really like never seen before, or do we want to highlight somebody who's thinking creatively and around the edge and depicts landscape and nature like we haven't seen it before? So it's not only the personal taste and the intuition that comes to it, but it's also what do we want to promote, what do we want to highlight, and so on.
And I think we've discussed that in terms of our competition, is that the originality is an important aspect. There are a lot of images out there, and a lot of images that get repeated. We see the same thing in competitions. Trends happen. So I mean, a location all of a sudden becomes trendy. Iceland, it happened to. Volcanoes we had, and these sort of the aerial photographs of river deltas. And I'm looking at, as a judge, and I know you are as well, are looking for images that are different, not for the sake of being different, but that show that are of a different subject. So if I see a great composition of something I've not seen before, it's going to make me go, oh, that's interesting. I want to,
yeah, it has to have
a bit longer.
It has to have a surprising element, and you mentioned it, the Iceland shot. Sometimes it's very hard to differentiate why you don't like an image, or why you are not reacting on it, because you see it and everything seems perfect. So there's a great competition, great light, and everything, a great composition, not competition. So and then still you are completely bored by it because you've seen exact that composition of that particular place 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the aerial shots. I mean, like they are getting so boring, although they are all so beautiful.
Yeah.
But comparing them, you have like just images that look amazingly beautiful, that are completely, I'm like, I would hang everything on my wall immediately, and still I couldn't figure out which is the better one from the other one, because they are all just looking the same in the end, and therefore it gets a little bit worn out as well.
Yeah.
The aerials, and so there are trends in photography, because I think 3-4 years ago we were all super impressed with all the aerials, and they would have easily won every competition. And now it's already, yeah, we've seen that. Next thing.
Yeah, well, let's go look at some pictures. I'll share my screen now, and I think we've got on our panelists, Brian, if you want to unmute yourself, you can chat today. What we'll do is I'll share my screen and bring in some. There you go. Can everybody see the Lightroom screen now?
Yep.
Excellent. So what I've done here is I've gone through Brian's pictures, and I've picked out the 3 that did the best and the 3 that did the worst out of the selection of images that he submitted. And I thought we'd go through and we'll talk through the images overall to begin with, and then we can actually go through a couple more in detail. Let's see if I can make the thumbnails bigger there. I think that works, does it? You can see those okay, Sandra?
Yes.
So I'll go through them one at a time. These are the 3 images that did well. And I should add that I think 2 of these are in the book that's currently being printed in South Korea. And these 3 images are the ones that did the least well in Brian's selection. Now it's hard to look at when you look at the images like that. They're all good images, and I think this is often misunderstood, that when an image isn't selected, it isn't because it isn't good, because there were thousands of great images that were submitted to the competition. But in my opinion, if I look at this, I mean, one thing that strikes me straight away about these images is light. The three images that did well have interesting lighting and character lighting. So for instance, on the very far left image here, we've got this glow appearing and we've got a side lit foreground. This image has got some amazing side lighting coming from a sunset, illuminating and adding shape and depth to the rocks. And this image is with a wonderful shadow of, is it Binion Beg, I think? It is glorious side lighting. Now, if you look at the other images, they're composed well, but it doesn't connect in the same way. The light isn't illuminating the whole subject together, bringing things together. This has subdued lighting. Still an interesting picture, but I don't think the whole picture doesn't cohere to me. It doesn't connect all together. And the final one is I mean, it's a beautiful sunset. But the question I ask myself, you might be the same, Sandra, is what else is it? When I'm looking at pictures, I'm trying to think, well, okay, it's a sunset with a nice view. What else does it do? What else is interesting about it? And how would you approach looking at those images, Sandra?
I mean, I think sometimes you immediately know, and you pointed out when I look at the selection of images, there is something very soft and hugging about the first three. And it's, I mean, like you mentioned the light, but of course there's light in the fourth one and in the last one too. So it's not only about the light, but I think it's about the soft quality of the rendition of light coming in together with clouds and fog. And so there's another element coming with it, that it's not only light. Then I think that I immediately see the technical flaws of the last three images. Like in the fifth image, for example, the horizon is not straight. So I mean, like I feel immediately uncomfortable because the horizon is not straight. And then I think that the composition is just not strong enough. There's too much going on. There's this other beach in the front, and as you said, there's nothing connecting. And I think that the elements in the fourth image are too strong and too hard. They are not hugging. They are just not fitting together to form an image that is, I mean, like it's maybe a good representation of a landscape, and therefore it can be used for that. And for that element, it might be a good image. I mean, like, does the horizon is a little bit, I think it does tilt a little bit.
I think it may be the foreshore on the far side it's under Sleoch, so the shore does stick out.
And then when you see the sixth image, it's the same. I mean, sometimes there's something optical going on that is just not working. The lines seem to be not straight, although it's the sky. I feel just uncomfortable. And I think there's too much going on. I think there's no real point of interest and there's nothing hugging you. When we compare this to the first image, like, you are immediately invited into the scene. You have this beautiful warm light, and I think that the fog in the middle ground really just gives you this sense of mystery that makes this image stand out more than the other ones.
I think in the images as well, the way the image connects together. You mentioned this image is a classic example of it. This is almost three separate images. There's the trees on the right, there's the Sleoch mountain on the left, and then there's the foreshore on the bottom left. And it feels like there's three disparate parts that aren't connected to a whole. Whereas you look at an image like this here, and I feel my eye traveling around the picture, going clockwise or anti-clockwise. My eye goes, for some reason, it goes anti-clockwise around the picture, but it follows the light and it follows the horizon, and things connect well. So the image appears as a whole rather than a separate parts.
Yeah, and it's the same with the third image. I think that the second image isn't particularly successful for me as well, because I think the left side is a little bit empty.
It's a bit empty down there, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, like, for me, the most interesting
definitely.
part is really the right one. It could almost be a square image in that respect. I don't know, maybe one has to try it out. But for me, the left part is definitely letting this image down to make it a standout image in general, like where I'm completely going nuts. So.
Yes. And this is a really interesting picture because it's compositionally it's quite difficult, but I think that the way the light connects the peak and the shadow together,
it's beautiful. You are immediately invited into the scene because you seem to be standing on this mountain yourself, and it's like you just want to run down and explore the valley. And this is, I think, what it makes it successful in a way. It's just not a rendition of a mountain scene, but it invites you in by the light and by the composition.
Have you got any questions about that one, Brian? Or
no, I mean that one that's my favourite of all of them, and I agree. It was quite hard to settle on composition because I think it works very well as a 4x5 vertical shot of Benin Beag, the peak on the left. The reason why I shot it the way that I did was because of the light and because of the shadow. I felt like
that's what makes it stand out. It was quite unique for me as well. It had my interest, and it's like tiny glimpse of a rainbow, I think, going in there as well, possibly.
Mm-hmm. I think that little lake over there on the left side, that also kind of made a difference. Yeah,
it's definitely a character shot, and one where the composition isn't obvious, but it does hold together nicely. Do you agree with what we said about these other images, maybe, Brian?
Yes. Yes, this one, the Fisherfield shot, the whole point, I suppose, for me was the nature of shooting sunrise there is that it's very difficult to bring detail out of any of the obvious subject matter. And so I very much viewed that shot as a shot in which the sky and the vastness was the subject, and I was almost trying to make the loch and the hills there, which are spectacular hills in Scotland, almost subsidiary to the wider scene, which is why I chose to have so much sky in it, and why I chose to try to not over egg the act.
I mean, this is another good example of it. It's a good illustrative shot of the location. And it, as you know, as a possibly as a book about the area or a little article on the area, it worked very well. But it's difficult. It's quite difficult to detach that from somebody who's never been to the area and looking at it from an independent point of view.
Exactly. I think that's a good example of where your experience probably makes the image mean more. It means more to me than it probably does to an objective viewer, but it's something always to bear in mind.
I know where you are there, so yeah, I'd be quite happy there as well. That's great. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next set of images, and bear with me while I work out how to. I will look at Olga's. I'll just unmute you so you can butt in if you want to, Olga, at any time. Now, this is Olga's set of images, which I mean, again, some of my favorite images in the competition, Olga. So 3 images, the first 3 chosen as the ones that did the best in the competition, and the other 3 the ones that did least well in the competition. Do you want to discuss these for a moment, Sandra?
Sure. Can you please enlarge them one by one? Can we see the whole set first, and then?
Yeah. Can you see all those together? Okay.
Yes.
See if I can go full screen in here.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to go through them?
I mean, first of all, I think that on the first glance, they all look quite nice. So it's not that if you are not going into details, I think that everyone is considered a nice landscape as such. And probably the only one that is like not as striking for me immediately is the fifth one. And it's not only because there's a road on there, but except for the road and maybe the patched light, it's just not striking enough for me as a foreground to catch my eye in a geometric way or something. I mean, the street just doesn't add to me anything. So this is, I think, for me, the least successful one. Take the second one. So, I mean, like here we have a situation where it's a complete difference because you have the river going into the scene. It's the same kind of idea maybe behind it, but the visual interest is so much stronger. Again, I think that in any way, and we will notice this when we see winning images, and we all probably know it when we take images by ourselves. There's always this little bit of magic that has to come to a scene to make it special. And that is not only light and special light, but most of the time it's some kind of element that adds to it. Might it be snow or hoarfrost or fog or rain? I think as soon as there is an element that is added to a well-lit scene, our interest as a viewer is excited beyond that, what we normally see and experience ourselves most of the time.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's very visible in the most successful images of Olga in any way.
I think this image for me was a great example. It's an idea that's been done quite a few times. I've seen the similar ideas in competitions before. But there's certain little details about this that make it work so well, and it's the way those images in the top right hand, the way the trees in the top right hand just appear out of the mist slightly, and the way it's divided into the 3 or 4 sections with the mist, and particularly for me, things like the banding in the mist next to the river, just little things that make me really happy, and I can imagine being the photographer there and being so happy seeing it. But the construction of this image is excellent. There's nothing really that lets it down, apart from the fact possibly that it's an idea that has been done a few times before.
Yeah, I think I would. It can vary. I mean, the chances are very high that you have many similar images like that in a competition, and then even though then this one image might stand out in a way because it's beautiful photographed, but still you cannot weigh all the other ones that are quite similar out to each other, and therefore might none of those have a chance of winning because they are just all too similar.
I've seen that happen in competitions before.
Yeah, me too. So and sometimes you ask yourself, why didn't I win? And of course, there's always this little bit part of luck where one image is chosen after another, and it has to do with when your image comes. I mean, like sometimes it's just you've been viewing a lot of crappy images, and then one image is a little bit better turns up, and you say, yes, I love it. And
yes.
And so resubmitting your work is always a good idea, because a different set of judges a different day might lead to different results. But especially with a kind of image like this, and this, I think it's different because it's not in the classic way these typical scenes that everybody photographs: going on a mountain, having the fog, having the nice autumn color. So you have to go deliberately to a place where there has been a wildfire or something, and it sticks out because it's unique in a way of the subject as such. It's not as often seen represented in a mood that supports the deadly trees. Within the scene. You just see the moss. It's very reduced in color. The sky really helps bringing out those neutral colors a lot. So I really love this image.
Well, an interesting one about this is, if I was looking through a set of images during one of the early stages, and I was seeing a lot of very similar things that I've seen before, if this came along, even if it wasn't that well composed, it would stop me for a moment, because it is interesting and different. And I'd spend a little bit of time going, well, do I like it? You know, it is different, so it's got my attention, but do I actually like what's in it? And in this case, it's composed exquisitely. I love the balance of it. And I love that sense of recession between the tree. It's nice that it refers to some art world stuff. I think it's a bit Caspar David Friedrich reminiscence in there, but it does a few things. It's original, it's striking, it's composed well. So a few things came together nicely for that image to do well, in my opinion. And this is an interesting one. I have pluses and minuses about this. I love the tonality of it and the sense of color. I love that hint of frost snow in the background. So and letting the sky go very light. So it's got a very airy atmosphere to it. It feels misbalanced, the tree and the space to the right-hand side. However, even though it's misbalanced, I still like it. It's striking because of that in some ways. What do you think?
I think I would completely sign off everything that you just said in a way that I like the tonality. I think that the balance is not there and that the composition is, for me, I mean, like, it tries to be brave because the height variation of the tree and the mountain somehow is misfitting. I mean, like, it misleads the viewer in a way because you expect the tree to be much smaller. But I think to really like strengthen the composition in that respect, to really highlight that, is not to take so much on the picture. I would probably be braver with a composition because it's such a classic, like, there's a tree, there's the mountains. And I think zooming in and being brave, maybe with a cropping is this very, very in a unique way, would have highlighted this dimension problem or this dimension idea much better.
Playing around with a more graphic nature, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah. Tim and Sandra, like, going back to the previous picture, if we had more detail in the clouds on the right side, do you think that might have balanced the tree better?
It might have done. I don't think it would have been successful in the same way anyway. But what do you think, Sandra?
I think it's not so much about the sky. It's really more about a tree sticking out a landscape in a very boring way.
To be fair, I actually quite like the treatment of the sky being high key, because it's something I don't see very often. If it's done well, it's really nice to see.
I think in the end, it's just too much on the picture to be reduced. I mean, like, there's just one, there's this tree, then there's this other tree. So you have the large, but then a pine tree or whatever this is, and then a little bit more pine trees on the right lower edge. And if I see the composition, for me, it's about the shapes of the mountains, it's about the tree and the color. And I would have probably trying to find a composition that just reduces on those like elements.
Yeah. So we'll have a look at the three pictures that didn't do as well. I mean, we talked about that one briefly. This one, the mist idea around reeds and mist, etc., is such a common theme that even though this is a lovely image, I don't think it stands much of a chance of doing well unless it had something more on top of what is a very popular theme. I mean, I think mist is that unique ingredient that makes everything beautiful, but it's such a common theme in competition entries that it becomes powerless in a way to influence the judges.
I think if this kind of image is submitted, it has to be really perfect, and then it has to be cropped in an ideal way. So I think that that this one that is coming in on the lower right side is totally disturbing. And I think that probably you have to wait just a little bit so that the swans are distributed much better, because otherwise they are a little bit clumpy in the middle. Although I really think that the atmosphere is very beautiful.
Now this image is very interesting. I'll let you talk about this one first, Sandra.
I think that, I mean, you know, it's a very classic landscape. I think the ingredients are right. You have hoar frost, you have the mirror, perfect mirror. I'm not sure about the image quality, whether it's just zoom now or
it's It may be just because it's zoomed in, it's only a 2048 pixel.
Okay, okay. So I don't refer on the quality of the image then, but I think that for me, that I would have loved the foreground to be more intense and the sky a little bit less. I think that the idea of putting this into the middle, the reflection, is lacking a little bit balance in the whole image. And of course, we've seen it.
Yes,
in a way.
Yeah, it's a very popular theme. It's, if you're in a location like this, it's the obvious. I want to take a photograph of everything I'm seeing with you. And when you get something like this where the subject matter is intrinsically beautiful, and it is in this case, then the photographer has to bring something really strong to it to show that they are doing more than just being present with a camera. And I can see it's composed. I can see the trees, the distribution of trees works well. I can see the reflection on the left-hand side, picking up those lenticular clouds works well, but it doesn't cohere in the right way. And because it's a popular type of view, I think it does have to be, like you were saying earlier, perfect or bring something additional beyond what it is.
I mean, what is interesting, if you look at these kind of images in a competition, and then you have to ask yourself, what are competitions for? I mean, like, you're measuring yourself against the images of other people who submit their images. And so what do you want to find out? For us as judges, it's very tough. If you see very classic scenes that are beautiful, you will probably never be able to differentiate which one is the best, except for those really special things, like you mentioned with dead trees. You know, like, there's something so different that you are immediately struck by the scene, and it's because you haven't maybe seen it, and you are just not immediately bored. And I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. I think it's a very beautiful image as such, and it will have its place for certain kind of ideas. It's just in a competition, it needs something more than that.
Have you got any questions about that, Olga?
Can you hear me?
Or about any of the images?
First of all, thank you very much for choosing me for this session, and it was very, I think it was very useful for me to understand my what I can do better and what I can do not so good. So it was very useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. Okay, I'm going to find. Okay, this is Tony Martin. Thank you very much for joining us, Tony. Let's see if I can get the bring all the images up for a second. P. So same idea again. We've got 3 of the images that did most well in the competition at the top, 3 images that did least well, or a selection of the ones that did least well at the bottom there. I'll start on this one. I'll just comment on the 5th and 6th images here. Similar to how we were talking earlier about the idea of, if an idea is something that you think somebody will have done before, then it has to have something additional, no matter how well you develop the idea. What we've got here is an image that is beautiful. It's set nicely, but it doesn't do anything more than represent the subject matter. There's a single idea, which is the idea of a contrast of a poppy seed head against a red flower, which I presume a poppy in the background, or a peony or something. It doesn't add anything extra to that, and as such, it's not going to stand out as particularly strong. Again, this is a stronger idea, and I do like the way it's composed, and it has a character to it. But again, there's something there where it doesn't have anything extra. I have this thing when I'm looking at pictures in the field, and I do it when I'm looking in competition photographs, that I look at the first thing to attract me. Why am I looking at it in the first place? in this case here, it's because I've got these almost like enclosing hands, the fronds of the fern and the wonderful color of the red hairs. Okay, what's the next thing it's doing? And I'll do that three times usually, is to try and think, has the idea been developed any further? And what we have really is a portrait here, and it's a portrait that works very well on its own, but it doesn't develop the idea any further than that, I don't think. If I go back to the first one, let's look at this here. This is one of the ones that did well, in my opinion. I can see it's, is it the Strangles by any chance?
It is, and I love the name. So I don't know if that inspired a slightly darker feeling. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I know the beach in Cornwall. It's the wonderful quartz. It's quartz on a slate beach, I think, and with irons with the yellows. But what you've got here is something that really stands out straight away. There's almost an initial "what am I looking at" feeling, and then there's a sense of okay, what's the composition going on? There's this sense of light down the middle and energy, and then you can see a shape. There's almost a body shape in there, but there's a series of ideas that can come through in the image, and likewise with these forms here with the sandstones. There's for me interest in the subject matter. It isn't just a simple representation there. You've chosen to compose it. I'm not a big fan of the cutting off of the top lump there, but that's by the by. This here again is an interesting color. This is an exercise in color and texture for me. It doesn't hold my interest for a long time because but I do like the contrasting colors you've chosen. Well, you've chosen to select. So in comparison with they're single ideas, whereas these are more complex ideas that are more likely to attract my attention.
Yeah.
Sandra.
Yeah, I do think that with images that show patterns and structures, I'm always looking for perfect quality and I mean technical quality. So I'm immediately losing interest when there is some technical flaws. So in the first image, I don't know if I'm right, but for me that the upper left corner is not sharp.
Yeah, I think it's just slightly out
of focus, and
possibly, yeah.
Like for me, this is a scene that lives off its pattern. So I'm immediately irritated when there's something not sharp in the image. And then I think beyond this being a interesting patch of different colors, it's not interesting enough to capture my interest for very long, even though it's in the good part. I mean, like in the best valued 3 images, but I think, as Tim said, it doesn't hold your vision because it's nature's art, but I think you didn't add enough from your art to nature's art to make this a really, really successful image. I think when I look at the whole set of images, for me the best one is the second one. Or at least for me, and maybe there's a difference again in taste. As we mentioned before, this can happen. So what distracts Tim, the bump that is missing in the upper part.
These aren't universal opinions.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe you are right, but I don't know, maybe it would have disturbed me as well when there would be in addition to this. But what strikes me immediately is that I'm not sure whether I'm looking at a body or if I'm looking at stones. So this could be a body, this could be, I mean, like it's so abstract, especially with not only the patterns on the rocks, but with the light coming in and how you composed it, especially because of those like vertical lines in the middle, which cut the image in 2 halves in a way. And you try to add symmetry or make symmetry out of it because you kind of expect this to be symmetric, but then it isn't. So I think there's a complexity in this image that completely strikes me and yeah, interests me and makes it pleasing for me to look at it. So with the third image, I think I'm attracted by the lines, but again, I think maybe if I'm not mistaken, it maybe lacks sharpness in the upper part. I'm not
Possibly.
sure again.
I don't think I've chosen the high resolution to be able to tell. Yeah.
So, but I mean, compared to the second image, it's interesting because it's a little bit dark and mysterious, but it's not as successful because it doesn't strike me as perfectly composed as the second one. So this is just a beautiful scene. I think what we've said about landscape images that are just having nice light, but nothing else beyond the reflection and the nice light. It's just a simple scene where we can enjoy. I think we all know these scenes. We feel nice sitting there, and we look at the display and think something special is missing. And there's just this mystery that is somehow it's too flat. Maybe maybe the light is coming too much from the front or the side front, but it's just not enough mystery to make this stand out.
Yeah, it's more of a descriptive picture than a creative picture in some ways.
I mean, it could have been. I mean, like you could have completely focused on patterns with a telephoto lens, and like takes this reflection and takes the trees and the geometric patterns that are in this image to highlight them and take them out. But the whole composition as such is just flat. Yeah.
I think.
And for the macro images, of course, I think sometimes it's so hard because we speak about these images and sometimes they mean so much and they are working in a different environment. They work maybe perfectly together as a triptychon or whatever on the wall. So what we speak now is really just in terms of what stands out in a competition. And I think in a competition, I always look for flawless and like composition that really strikes you, especially with a poppy image. I think that it's just not interesting enough when, I mean, one could have really zoomed in and make the symmetry much stronger and the color contrast like much more direct, so that it's really a very clean composition and not just one poppy coming out of the left lower corner and kind of yeah, dangling in the picture in a way. So it's just not interesting enough when it comes to composition.
So I think we agree that one is the one. I think that's probably the strongest picture for myself as well. Have you got any questions?
I mean, it has something almost Picasso-esque, if you have a word like that.
You could have an Edward Weston feel to it as well, yeah.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah. Got any questions about that, Tony?
No, I mean, that's super valuable feedback. I think you said something really interesting, which is some of them I haven't added anything of myself to. I was just there and I've seen something interesting and captured it. Whereas others I've kind of like worked out or put my interpretation on it, which I think come across a bit stronger. And I can exactly see in the images you've selected that really sort of pulls out the sort of contrast. So no, fantastic feedback. Thank you very much.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much, Tony. Right, I'm going to go back to our list of attendees for a second, because I think we've probably got somebody else in there who we can use. Let's see, Eugene. Okay. Eugene Ferron's just joined us on the panel, I think. If I say unmute, I think, well, if I've got it right, we have some of Eugene's pictures here. Do you want to start chatting about these, Sandra?
I don't see anything right now.
Oh, okay, I'm not sharing, that's why. Sorry about that. Do you want to go through these?
When it's always the case that the upper three are the most successful
That's
ones,
correct.
and
yeah.
Okay, So, I mean, I think like in the first submission that we discussed, it's a little bit here as well. You see already that the light is hugging the first three images in a way.
Very
So
complementary light.
you have these very soft tones, and so you immediately, even when they are small thumbnails, you feel a comfortable feeling when looking at those. Yes, I think this is really beautiful because the vertical rocks really invite you into the scene, and I think that the even distribution of clouds in the upper part kind of gives the impression that you have an overcast day, and it really closes the image from the upper side, but still you have this moment of light which makes it yeah, in a way inviting and magical. So
there's a wonderful soft lighting in the background, just around the peak of the rocks. Yeah,
almost theatrical in a way. And
yes, good word for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and with this, I mean, like forest scenes are very tough sometimes to compose. I think like there's a lot of ingredients that make this a good image. There's one ingredient that lacks a little bit, or not one. Maybe I think that the first or like my eye goes immediately to the right part of the composition. And although everything is hugging and beautifully lit, I think that the composition of the right side could be improved. I think the light side, the left side is much better because it's so soft, and there's this strong tree with a candelabra, and then all these soft trees receding in the background, while the right side is a little bit plumpy. In comparison to that, it takes away the lightness of the left scene. So I think to make it a winner image, it must be a little bit more of the same kind of textures. So either compare and contrast so that you really work out the contrast, but then a simple scene photographed like this is not adding up. This is maybe the same like we discussed with Olga, with a huge tree in the mountains. So yeah. If you have contrast in the image, then work on a composition that highlights those contrasts in a way, and just don't do a normal composition. But otherwise, I would prefer to be harmonious within the whole scene. I think that this is just a beautiful, beautiful shot. I think you can say a lot of wrong things about it. There's nice patterns in the sky. This little blue streak is nice, and the side lighting is great. What makes it stand out from another one, or what makes it not stand out from another one, is probably that we've seen, or we will see in a competition like this, many shots like this. Everybody who goes into the mountains kind of takes their foreground, middle ground, background, and yeah, tries to make this kind of pleasing scene. So there's nothing that sticks out to make this so special that you have to take it, but there's nothing big that you can fault about it.
Yeah, it's looking for that one extra thing, isn't it, to make it rise above similar levels of photograph. And looking at the three images that did least well in the competition, I mean, this one for me it works very well, but it doesn't hold up compositionally as strongly. It doesn't have as strong an idea. The light's great, and the way the mist works is great, but I find myself slightly off balance with the composition. There's an emptiness on the left-hand side of the frame that doesn't quite work. With the middle ones, I love the textures, but it doesn't have the sense of light that we saw in the other images.
It's just too plain.
Yeah, the consistency of tonality in this foreground, apart from the crack, doesn't differentiate it. And this is a nice idea. I love the perched rock, but it doesn't hold my interest as much as the other photographs.
Yeah, especially, and you see it that when you have patches of sky in a very different way, a little bit of blue sky, a little bit of gray and overcast sky, it immediately unbalances the whole composition, and it makes it maybe a little bit too complex, because the foreground is already quite complex with the heath and all those rocks. So I think that the complexity is not needed in the sky.
The subject's sort of crying out for that that dark background and the spotlight in the same way as a theatrical hero shot. I mean, it's still a nice image. It's still a nice representation of what we have there. I don't think it has that sort of theatricality of light. Does that make sense, Eugene? Let me unmute Eugene for a second.
Right. Yeah, it all makes perfect sense, actually. So
yeah,
yeah, I think with a lot of these images, you know, obviously it's nice for you to be able to judge them, because, you know, I'm obviously very connected to a lot of these images. So for you to sort of give feedback from a completely sort of unbiased point of view, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
You know, it's good for me to sort of learn. I mean, this image we're looking at now is possibly one of my favorite images I've taken. I really,
well, that's wonderful. Yeah,
the light lasted about 30-40 seconds. So,
yeah, and the nice thing about that is you've got yourself set up ready for that light to happen with the composition. Normally the situation that you end up like that is the light happens, you're not ready with the actual composition, where in this case the composition works perfectly and then the light happened, I think.
Yeah, yeah, quite. And then just a comment on this one. I see exactly what Sandra was saying about that uniformity across the sort of background, and how the sort of the deep tones and the sort of fading trees in the background would work sort of better on the right hand side of that image, sort of behind where that main tree trunk is, just to sort of give it a bit more of a lift, I guess. So, but yeah, thanks very much. And
no problem at all. Thank you very much, Eugene.
Yeah, pleasure.
And just checking the time. Yeah, we've got another 10 minutes. I'll see if with our other participant has turned up, which would be Daniel Eek. Right, how do I get to my, let me stop sharing that for a moment.
Yeah, I see Daniel.
Daniel, there we go, yes. I'm just bringing Daniel in as a panelist. Press the wrong button, sorry. Okay, let's share my screen again. So the same things going on here. We've got the top three images, the ones that did the most well in the competition, and the bottom three did the least well. And I would say the major differentiating feature here between the top set of images and the bottom set of images is the originality of the content. I mean, and this image in particular is just wonderful sense of light within it. But looking at the full set of images, this is intriguing. I presume it's a set of frozen surface of a pond with an interesting treatment. It's like a negative vignette on it. This image is a tonality that's very interesting. It's the sense of lightness of the tones, almost pastel-esque tones in the image, work really well. And like I say, this one, excellent. It has that, it looks like a European version of the American aspen picture, but done with birch. So I particularly like that myself. If we look at the three images that didn't work so well, this is struggling for a central idea. I think we were in a situation where we got some nice frost going on in the image. It's a lovely sense of texture going on, but there isn't a compositional structure that's bringing everything together into an idea. This one, actually, I quite like. I mean, I might go against the overall judging of the scores here. I think it's quite a strong sense of tonality. I love this boulder. Maybe the idea is a little bit messy. It may be that, I wonder if I can do it on here. Bear with me a second. It may be that I would have liked to have seen something a bit tighter around the rock itself, but I think I'm being fussy there, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. This one again is, I think it's lacking that final sense of compositional structure. So this little island in the foreground's not contributing a lot, but it's quite bright, so it attracts attention. The reflection is nice. The top where the light's coming in is almost attracting your attention to the top right as well. So it's not really cohering. These rocks I find are the most interesting part of the picture in the center, where we've got the little burst of orange grasses and then the split rocks and reflection. So that's my general opinion of the, oh, I didn't mention that one. Yeah, this was just one that I found texturally interesting. You can see that it's the frozen ice, but it's got some novel textures in there, and the browns as well as the blues. But what's your opinion of these, Sandra?
I think it's a very interesting set of images to make a few like standard comments about why an image is successful or not. I think you see immediately that the ones with the highest scores are somehow a little bit more intimate, so they reduce whatever the scene is a little bit more and concentrate on a very small crop of the scene. So you are not wandering around the image and looking for something that the author might want to tell us. So I think huge landscapes or big landscapes with a lot of stuff in there primarily work if there's something, like we said, elements added to the scene. When I look at the whole set, it's interesting that the tone and the tonal values are so different from all the images that we've discussed before. They are very bright and they are very toned down and not very much into the face and very reduced color. So I like that about the whole set. And when I see the first image, I actually wonder why this got high points, because I think that the subject matter is very interesting, but I think the editing lets it completely down. I think that the negative vignette, so the white vignette that is added to the image, is making this look very artificial to me, and therefore, except for the interesting patterns, it just looks very very made on the computer in a way to focus on the middle parts. I think, yeah, I think I will concentrate on the ones that are in the down part for a bit. For example, this one. I said, yeah, I'm like, Tim, you said you don't like it. I must say, this is an image that could be reminiscent of Hans Strand or maybe Jan Töve Beyond Order images. I mean, those kind of images where there's no special light, but you have an even contribution of subject matter, like you have all these structures, you are getting into it. I think it doesn't even lack such a, I mean, it does have interesting composition, because this tree skeleton and this could almost be a person, a human that is very thin, yeah. Like walking through the forest. So I think only I'm like, Hans Strand is always saying, when he's composing these images, he's always looking to the edges. He makes sure that all the edges are perfectly composed, that nothing disturbs the viewer. And so I think in general, this does work for me. What I'm getting drawn to a little bit is this little birdhouse on the left tree, which takes my view a little bit outside the image, although it kind of picks up my interest, but not as a competition image. I think Hans Strand images in his latest book, for example, they would never be successful in a competition because exactly those reasons. A panel of judges would probably not be appreciative of the discovering or of the discovery that you have to have in these kind of images.
Yeah,
but from this,
you probably please 2 or 3 of the judges, but you never convince the rest of them.
yes, exactly. The rest will just say, what? No. Yeah. So, but I really like this image. For me, this is one of the most interesting ones in the whole collection, I must say. So see, different tastes. I do like this one as well, but here in this particular case, I would look for a better composition. I don't like that the stone is cropped in the way it is, and I don't like the very large branch on the pine tree that is going out of the image. So for me, those kind of images where you have even light and a lot of complex structures, they really have to be meticulous composed in order to convince me that this is a great image. Yeah, and I think Tim already said a lot of things about this. This is just, I think, too simple, and one should have focused on one a particular smaller crop to find out what's most interesting in this scene. I do like the birches. I really do like the birches. When you have the third image again up, like the simple one, I'm just not convinced again.
It's a popular idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very popular idea, and it's again a little bit, I don't know, a little bit too bright in the upper parts, and maybe the composition is not as strong as it could have been. And there's a difference between European birches and aspens, because European birches are much more like not as straight.
Yeah. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all of our panelists to unmute and ask them if they have any questions they'd like to ask us. And also Rajesh, if he's got any questions he'd like to ask us about the competition. But yeah, panelists, have you got anything you'd like to ask us?
I'm just very glad to hear your opinion about my pictures. I have nothing to say against you. I'm really glad to hear Sandra's words about the one you like the best, because that is more me, and I'm totally aware that this doesn't appeal to judges a lot, but it's very much me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't dislike it. I'm a big fan of, like say, Hans Strand and Jem Southam pictures, but they do demand a meticulousness of composition, like Sandra says, and I think that's not quite there. I'm not looking at it for some sort of strong graphic element in there, but it's a structure. So it's like Sandra said about the bird box on the left hand side. Is that part of the picture in many ways? It's offset slightly. There's a little hole in the center of the picture, just above the tree, which it wants my eye to lead somewhere. And it's little things like that. When you're reading the picture, you're reading it like a book. And I always want to look at pictures like that and have a little story that as your eye wanders around, it picks up on things. Yeah. But it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination.
And I just think a very important point that you make, Daniel, is that images that are important to you, just don't let anybody mess around with that. And the thing is that competitions are not a great measurement of how good your image is or how good you are as a photographer. I mean, like, this is a tiny moment where random number of judges have an opinion about something, and it's always great to measure yourself, and it's great to be successful. It's nice to see that an image maybe is really rising above everyone else, and I think we all occasionally make an image that that has a chance of winning a competition, but I think it doesn't take away from all your personal work that might never win any competition, but it's very important to you and important to others, because it's just not candy for the eyes of a lot of different judges. Yeah.
I think it's most funny that the picture that were the best scored, the one that you don't like, Sandra, the one with the ice, refrozen ice, that's the one I do feel the least about.
Yeah.
And that was scored the highest. And so I'm just with you all the way there, Sandra, that it doesn't mean that much to me, the competition, and I don't take it that hard. It's just fun to hear what you think. So I'm very glad to hear your opinions.
Anybody got any questions about judging photographs in particular, in general, or?
I had a question about the, as well as what we've talked about tonight, how you think about the projects that were submitted and how you look at those, you know, as opposed to isolated images, what your sort of thought processes were around those. Because I found that, for me personally, pulling together a group of images in a series, I found really interesting. I'd never done that before, and that was kind of the reason I entered. So it'd be interesting to know how you think about it.
It's a good point. I think perhaps we need to run another session on projects in themselves, because they're judged in a very, very different way. And I don't think there really is, probably isn't much in common in the way they're judged, because yes, we're judging them for some of the reasons you've just seen, but more important is the way the images tie together. And it does, just because you've got a good set of images doesn't necessarily mean you'll do well in a project. And I'm trying to think.
I think it has to be, I mean, like it has to be a standout topic. And I think that it's a very complex thing to put together a set of images that work together. If you're working on a project, it's easier than if you just pull images together later. So I think you immediately see in the winning projects that somebody has a thought process behind it, or maybe really worked on this. But I do think in the end, it's much more interesting than having a single image that is successful, because you see, I mean, like me as a judge, I was more interested in seeing what people came up and put together with a process of selection behind it, rather than just singling out single images. But as Tim said, there's a big difference, because you are not judging so much a single image and how it's composed or anything, but the overall impression of the subject matter as such.
I was just going to share, I think we've got a few, fifth place. Okay, we've got a few examples of the images that did well here. I mean, the winning project here by Matt Palmer was a great topic. I mean, the topic is so of its moment, with the prevalence of wildfires around the world. The story about Tasmania being particularly interesting because the fires are happening to forests that don't cope with fires. Many of the wildfires are in places that are cyclic in nature. So there are some benefits as well. And also his individual images were incredibly strong, and they told a story of the negative side of it, but also a little bit about salvation. So there was a really strong narrative element, and the pictures themselves worked well.
Yeah, and each of the single pictures were good too. I think this is very important. I think it's very hard to compare, because you have a lot of portfolios sent in that are just beautifully photographed, but then you have a topic that is really good, and it's photographed in a very good way and strong way, with images that stand out from a unique perspective, and by composition and form as well.
It's really hard to judge a competition if you have a set of images that are great images with a weak theme. It's difficult to make those go any higher than a good project theme with good images as well. It's I suppose the closest you get to it is like the project from Carl Smorenberg here. I mean, the connection in these images is just a location. It seems like a fairly weak connection, but it's a location that we haven't seen in this sort of variety for a while. I know the Drakensberg typically has a certain ID of pictures you expect to see. So when you see a large range of images from lots of different biomes within the area, that tells a story of itself, even though the underlying story is fairly simple. It's the Drakensberg, but the images themselves are strong enough and the variety to elevate it beyond just a location one. Same with Hans Strand's images. They're just Iceland, but they're done so exceptionally well and with a lot of variety. So it doesn't have to be the great narrative content in a story. The fourth place was a great example here, which is it's a place that I originally thought was Fontainebleau in Paris when I first saw the pictures. Didn't realize there was a place like this in the east of America. And these pictures worked well because they connected so well thematically. They told a story of a season and a location together.
Although I must really say that I'm sorry that I'm disagreeing a little bit. I mean, you can always judge only what has been sent in, and if you pick like 5 winners or projects to display, then you can only take it what you have. I think that by far the strongest one is the one in the first place because it has subject matter and great images. I think that most of the other ones, and even the one with the trees and the autumnal color, are for me a little bit too less differentiated to work together. I mean, like, they are great images, but as such, I would have wished for more variation.
If you can get that magic combination of a story, a connection, and great individual images that work well together, it's there for taking. The competition is probably.
I'll try again.
Yeah. What have we got? Trims. Theo's collection is his latest set of images. They have this strong story.
They have a narrative and they have variation.
Yeah.
And the one by Trim, Ivar, it's the same. I think there's much more variety. It's like every image in itself. So in the end, you can ask yourself the question whether some of the images are not strong and maybe letting a portfolio down. And I think this is the highest risk when submitting a portfolio or a story or project or something like that, that one image takes away from the strength of the whole set. So you have to be really careful when selecting those.
Plus we got the that's a thematic one on a location again with a story behind it. I think we get the idea there, but we'll have a chat about possibly running a separate session on projects. I think there's some interesting things to be said there.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time a bit now. Is there any final questions from anybody?
Yeah, I've got I had 2 questions. I know we're running out of time, but
no problem at all.
Okay, the first question is, obviously, this is one of the first competitions I've ever entered where you're not asked to put a name or a description with the images, which I find is great because I feel that you as the people as judges can judge them on the sort of quality and whether they feel that they're connecting with the image rather than the image and the name. I hope I'm articulating myself okay here, but do you feel there's place for both? I mean, do you not sometimes feel that the name sort of shows a name of an image shows a connection that the photographer had to that scene, and maybe that is actually taking away from your interpretation of the photo by not having a name? Does that make sense?
Personally, I don't like names, but what do you think, Sandra?
I think a name can add so much meaning to an image.
Yeah.
It can. That's probably why I don't like them.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a very interesting observation, actually, because I think that if you are an artist, then I think that it can work either way. And I think that an image that has a name and adds meaning by having a name can be super successful and be part of your artistic vision. I think when we compare images, and this is maybe what makes it sometimes so unfair. So what do we judge? Do we judge really just the visuals, or do we judge the artistic intention of the photographer who submitted this? So you can really answer this question both ways.
Yeah, that's why I sort of asked it. So because it's such a, like, some competitions ask you for a name and a big long story that goes behind the image, which I always feel is.
I must say, like, we have just judged the European Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and in the past we haven't asked for titles, and we haven't asked for descriptions. And this one is the first year where we asked for descriptions, but as a free decision of the submitter. So, I mean, like, you could decide yourself whether you add something or not, whether it's important to you to give the jury some information or not. And it was very interesting in the jury process that I mean, first of all, it was interesting because some people really had the feeling that they had to write novels to their images, and just thinking of the time that somebody spends on submitting a set of images and spending time to write novels with each. But the other hand is, it was very helpful as a judge, I must say, because particular images need an explanation. That might be not so much the case with like a landscape that is just beautiful, but as soon as a topic is a little bit more complex, then the description might help to understand the value of the image. And I think this is not in a negative way, because sometimes it makes it special, and not in a way that the image has no value before. But when you compare it to another image that is maybe just ordinary subject and has no complexity at all, then this information can help. Because in the end, you know, the results, especially in a world that is so loaded with visuals, I think we need stories and we need interesting concepts as well. So that's
the difference, isn't it? It's the story side of it. It's the narrative side that's difficult to communicate with a single picture, especially with landscape. And I know when we judge the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, those descriptions that come through are so useful quite often, because you'll look at a picture and you'll say, I like it, but can you tell me what the narrative says? And they read the narrative and it's either, oh, okay, or, oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, I mean, like, when you see the back, the end of the thing, you know, you produce a catalog, you produce maybe an exhibition, you produce an online gallery, rather than just looking at another set of beautiful image in the end, because we are all flooded by competitions, we are all flooded by images constantly every day. So I think images that have something that makes them interesting visually and having maybe a more complex story to them are in the end making a more interesting product for the audience.
Do we need another category for narrative landscape image?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's hard to say how it is in the landscape category.
It's like an individual, it's like a single image project, isn't it, almost?
Yes.
You have to write an essay back to enter.
That's right. That's going to make judging the 13,000 images a little bit longer.
I must say, let's change competitions completely and just go for projects and series instead.
No, it's not far off. I think the projects are a very interesting aspect of the competition, definitely. So more people enter projects. Any other questions? You'd say you had another question?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So this is not a criticism. It's an interest. So it's something we've discussed amongst people actually. How do judges dissociate themselves from images that they may know very well, and especially if those images maybe were taken on one of their workshops, or so say for I'm just using it as an example. Sandra has a workshop. She has a client. She helped with a competition, she sees it in the thing. it's easily entered into the competition, but obviously you have to judge that very subjectively. So how do you as judges dissociate yourself?
We did have this in the competition. In the finals, a few people declared the fact they knew somebody or they knew the project, etc. So it's basically as long as somebody's honest about it.
Even during prejudging, I think we had a few images that were recognized and voluntarily,
you say, well, I can't really judge this one.
Yeah, but honestly, I mean, I think this is a very complex question, and you can't really find the perfect answer to this. The only answer would be you can only submit images that are unknown and unseen by anybody. So no workshop images, not published before, not on social media, and so on. So other than that, I think we are all visually aware, and we are not able to differentiate or to take ourselves out of the judging process in a way when we know images. I've experienced that some judges really support images that they know and maybe want to see promoted more. So I mean, you cannot say that judges are generally loyal or loyal to the whole audience. They sometimes do support their friends. I don't know if this happens in this competition. I hope not, and the discussions didn't show that. But I think not judging something because you know it is not fair either. Because we all know things, and I think probably most of us know maybe 2/3 of the images that have been submitted in some way, because we know them, or because we have seen them on social media before, or we know that somebody is working on a project anyway. So I mean, I think there's no way of not or of being neutral on this. I think what I always say in competitions to my fellow judges when I'm conducting one, I would always say, don't take yourself out of the discussion if you know somebody, because it's unfair. If the images are deserving, but I want you to look very fair on this. And I think sometimes it can also be a disadvantage if you know work already, because you have seen it and it's not a surprise anymore. And therefore it can work negatively towards the success of your image as well. So it's not only that it's a bonus, it can work either way. But I think we have to try to be as neutral as possible and take our knowing the person and maybe that we conducted and helped this image out of this thing, and just say, is this a good image, and does it is it better than another one?
Does it fit the competition, and is it done well, etc.
Yeah, and I think the other reason why we have more than 3 or 4 judges is to try and minimize that effect as well.
Yeah.
You have a broader range of opinions, and you have less chance of individual judges influencing things overtly.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time to review all of our images today, I guess, and for running the competition. It's great. I think everyone loves entering it. So,
well, thank you for everybody who's come along, and the panelists for letting us have a look at their images. Thank you to Sandra, and we hope you enjoy the competition again this year coming up. We'll definitely have a chat about doing a project one, because I think that could be quite interesting, and we'll send an email out about that later. And don't forget, there is the American version of this, and just because you've gone to one doesn't mean you can't go to the other. So feel free to have a look at that one. Hopefully this will all be recorded and on YouTube for people to have a look back at if they missed part of it. So, but yeah, thank you very much to everybody.
Yes, thank you. And have a good evening or day, whatever.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.